So Orla and Brendan have been self-advocates for approximately 10 years. They're also lecturers at Trinity College Dublin, and they lecture on the Inclusive Education disability module on the Bachelor in Social Studies program. They've really been strong kind of advocates working around relationships and sexuality rights for people with intellectual disabilities. And we're just absolutely delighted to have them here to kind of speak to us today from the service user lecturer perspective. And then Dr. Michael Feely is Assistant Professor at the School of Social Work and Social Policy at Trinity College Dublin. His work has been very impactful around disability theorization and research within disability studies, sexuality theory and research, gender theory and research, and around the body and brain and in social theory and other areas. And Michael has won scholarships and awards, including the Trinity Teaching Innovation Award, and passed his PhD with no corrections. So we're really lucky to have these three excellent speakers here. And so what I'll do is, it's 11:04 now, I won't talk any longer, and I'll hand over now to Orla, Brendan and Michael, who will speak to you for the next 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks very much. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that working now? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
it's not fully shared is the only thing.
Okay, so I wonder, can I do?
Yeah, just click on slideshow at the top.
Okay.
Yeah, and then click on from beginning. Oh wait, yeah, maybe that'll do it. Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks a million. Okay, so I think how we'll do this is I just want to introduce the project, the kind of background and context to how Orla and Brendan are working with us now. And then Orla and Brendan are going to talk about their experiences of teaching, and also some of the experiences of other self-advocates with intellectual disabilities that we've had as co-lecturers in the school as well. So this all comes from myself and Adurna Garcia, applied for a capsule Trinity Teaching Innovation Grant in 2016, so quite a while ago at this stage. And we proposed working with a group of self-advocates to co-design, co-deliver and co-assess a module for undergraduate social work students about supporting people with disability. And the other part of that was participatory research, that we do research on how this kind of pilot project went. And the idea was to try it as a way of teaching, and hopefully maybe inspire others to kind of try other teaching initiatives in this area. So we got the grant, and it's largely thanks to Capsule that we were able to get the thing off the ground. So we hired a group of self-advocates with intellectual disabilities as part-time staff in the school, and they have all the kind of same rights, I suppose, and conditions as other part-time staff. So the staff cards and the rates of pay and so on are all the same. We co-designed and co-delivered our first module in 2017, and that was also, it was co-assessed as well. So basically it was assessed by students completing a normal academic essay for 50%, and then turning that academic essay into some kind of inclusive, accessible presentation that would make complex ideas understandable in an accessible fashion. And that was marked entirely by the self-advocates. That was given equal weighting as well. Now, on the first year that we've run it, it's been running around about 5 years now with different self-advocates each year. But on the first year we ran it, we did quite extensive research on student responses. So that was through kind of anonymous questionnaires and also through focus groups. And we've published now in Disability and Society on how students experience these kind of initiatives. And I suppose the feedback there is it's overwhelmingly positive, I suppose. So the students said the things that came out of it was they welcomed the initiative, they were excited about it, they were initially anxious about how it might affect their grades. Would people with intellectual disabilities give marks that were very divergent with their other marks? That didn't happen in the end. They were also a bit embarrassed or anxious about causing offence, political correctness, that kind of thing. So they said that the project kind of was helpful in alleviating their discomfort around disability. They valued kind of the powerful roles it created for self-advocates, and they liked the way it kind of subverted and messed around with the usual teacher kind of, or the usual social worker service user relationship. They came to accept and value the self-advocates as lecturers and markers as well. And they said it increased empathy. And also a big thing was a lot of them were working in disability before, and they said, or had adult children with disabilities, and they said it really made them think about what people with disabilities could achieve in life, and to really aim higher in terms of what the people they support might be capable of achieving. So there's a link there to the article if anyone is interested in it, or can contact me about it. But at this stage, I want to hand you over to Orla and Brendan, who are going to talk about both the experiences of self-advocates that have taught in the past on the module and their own experiences as well. So yeah, Orla and Brendan, over to you guys.
Okay. I'm reading the first three. Claire it's a great job, a great option in the oldest, most impressive universe in Ireland. It looks great on my CV. Mags, I love teaching, and it's great option to show that people with a disability can be lecturers like you. Andrew, I am a graduate of Trinity, and it's great to come back as a member of staff.
It's a fantastic opportunity to be a lecturer in Trinity College. I never knew it would be possible. Right, it's a chance to have a role that matters and not just a nobody. I never thought I'd be a lecturer in Trinity. Sean, it's brilliant to get to do something important with your life. It's a dream come true. Obviously, my name is Orla. For example, as someone with extra support needs, I never thought it would be possible to become a teacher. I thought it was fantastic. It was a fantastic opportunity for me and would look great on my CV too.
Brendan, I wanted to get involved because I like to speak my mind. I love it. That thought of us teaching social workers instead of them telling us what to do. I like the way the tables are turned.
Sorry. So this one is why people think it's important to have self-advocates as lecturers.
Yeah.
We have first-hand experience of a disability who better know to talk about the support we need. People without a disability support needs don't know what it's like to walk into our shoes. We know the best about the support we need. It shows that everyone is equal. Anyone can be a lecturer.
I strongly feel it's important for people with disabilities to have a voice in our society. People with all kinds of disability should be noticed. Right, it's important to hear people with disabilities' point of view, not just what you read in books, Sean. Through listening to us, they can become better social workers and supporters.
Just 2 minutes left now, thanks.
Okay. Because we're equal, we should have the chance to teach. Teaching allows us to share our knowledge and to show people that we can do.
Brendan, I had a bad experience with social workers interfering in my business and my private life. It's important for us to teach students, social workers, to listen to us and support us with the things we would like to help with.
Will I read that, Michael?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, conclusion. We think that their experience showed the projects like this can work and can be very popular with university students and self-advocates. We hope our experience might inspire university lectures across a range of social and healthcare professions to include self-advocates in both teaching and assessing students. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Wow, that's absolutely excellent presentation. So maybe Michael, if you want to kind of minimize your slides, and while I prepare to introduce Joe, maybe he might look to share his slides. So that was a really excellent presentation. I can see there's already a comment there in the Q&A and a good question there. So what we're going to do is I would encourage you, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and I will try to get to as many as I can once the second presentation is over. Yeah, so just one more big thank you to Orla, Brendan and Michael for that great presentation. So now we're going to move over to our kind of main speaker. So this is Professor Joe Duffy. We're absolutely delighted to have him here. So he is a professor at Queens University Belfast. He has published extensively on service user involvement and has done lots of work around this. He was asked by the Council for Social Work Education, which is the regulatory body for social work in the United States, to research and develop a curricular guide around service user involvement for the United States. And this led on from him getting a Fulbright scholarship in 2019 related to his work around this. His research interests, of course, relate to service user and carer involvement, but he's also very concerned with social inclusion, citizenship-based social work, social justice, and the kind of interface between social work and political conflict. And he's done a lot of work around that too, and has included individuals with experience of trauma related to political conflict. So yeah, we're just really delighted to have Joe here. He's been teaching and talking in an invited way on this subject matter for a long time. Yeah, and I suppose, so without further ado, I will pass you over to Joe, and he'll be talking for about half an hour on this topic. And Joe, I'll give you a reminder when you've about 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. I have to say it's a really hard act to follow, Orla and Brendan. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed your presentation, and a lot of the points that you made, and Michael will connect with some of the points that are in my short presentation as well. So thank you very much for that. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot from it. So and I'd like to find out more about it as well after today. So very well done, and thank you. Thanks as well, Susan, for inviting me to be a presenter at today's really important event. So I'm going to talk for, it's a short presentation really. I've got about 10 slides, and I'm going to share with you some of the insights and experiences that I've gained and developed over 20 years or more of working in the field of service user involvement. It's been really, really enjoyable work, very complex work, very challenging, but the bottom line is, for me, I've always felt it was always really worth it, such as what you heard just now from Brendan and Orla and Michael. The benefits of service user involvement are absolutely immense, and that's what really motivates me and keeps me really engaged in this really important area. But I suppose when I go on to the next slide, you're going to see that there's about 7 sort of signposts that have helped me to understand this topic and to get deep into it, I suppose, over quite a considerable time. And they've been like a guide or a compass for me to actually navigate me towards better understanding and better promoting engagement in the field of service user involvement and the whole pedagogy of service user involvement. So I'll just introduce you to those now. So if this PowerPoint actually works for me, it doesn't seem to want to move on to the next one. So there we go. It's not working.
If you have any hassle, Joe, we can share.
Yeah, it just won't, it's frozen, but I'll come out of that and try again.
Yeah, perfect.
These things happen all the time.
I know.
This one. Are you seeing that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so slideshow from beginning. That's better, isn't it?
Here we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I've done lectures in the past where the power went out and nothing worked, and you just have to go the old-fashioned way and get the chalk out of your pocket, even, you know. So
yeah.
happen. So these are the sort of 7 words that come to mind when I was preparing for today: reflexivity, opportunity, criticality, planning, development, research, and reciprocity. So I'm just going to look at each one of these in a wee bit more detail. Peter Beresford, who's written widely in this particular field of service user involvement, and he argues that it's really important from the very start to reflect on the context. In other words, the reasons why service user involvement are being thought of education. And Beresford in 2005 encourages us to think about whether this is coming from a consumerist or a managerial standpoint, or whether this is more coming from a democratic citizenship basis. And I think that's the starting point, is to actually reflect on having that internal and collective reflexive dialogue, and that's why I've referred to it as reflexivity. Just checking in with ourselves in terms of, well, why am I doing this? What are the reasons for doing this? Is it because I'm being told to do it, or because there's a law requiring me to do it, or there's a policy requiring me to do it, or is it the right thing to do from a citizenship and more of a democratic point of view? So I think that's a very important reflective and reflexive conversation to have with ourselves, because the way in which we answer those questions will in turn determine and influence and shape the approach that we'll have to how we go about developing service user involvement. One of the pieces of work I've done recently with Peter Beresford, we've argued that service user involvement has to be more than bringing voices into the classroom. Of course, bringing voices into the classroom is very important, but as you heard Brendan saying there, and you heard Orla saying, it has to bring about change. There has to be a narrowing of the gap in terms of understanding. People's understandings have to improve about disability, about trauma, about conflict, about mental health, or whatever the area is that you're talking about. It should result in change. It should make a difference. And the bottom line is, it should result in making things better. From my experience and the research that I have done, that's why service users, actually people with lived experience, want to be involved in the first place. So that's the first signpost, that need to have a conversation with ourselves, which I've referred to as reflexivity. And never has reflexivity been more important actually than in the current context of the pandemic. We've got a paper coming out soon in the British Journal of Social Work where we're actually expressing some concern about the fact that in the current context of ubiquitous crisis brought about by the pandemic, the voices of service users aren't being heard loudly enough. They actually have been sidelined. And there's research that we're reporting on in over 20 countries that indicates that in times of difficulty in education, service users' voices actually haven't been heard, and they, in some regards, they've actually been silenced. So it's really, really important that we currently, in the current context, we actually we do appreciate the importance of the way in which we're being impacted by COVID. Some of the research that I've done over the years has evidenced in terms of the second signpost of opportunity. Social work students have been helped in their understanding of social work values and what these values actually mean. And social work values and the impact of trauma and conflict and empathy, these are what's referred to in the literature as threshold concepts by Wendy Foote in 2012. So these are aspects of learning that can be challenging, that can be troublesome, that are difficult to teach, not only difficult to teach, but they're also difficult to understand. But we have found through some of the projects we've done over the years that with the assistance and help of service users, in working directly with the students, that the students have been able to develop a sense of what's referred to in the literature as praxis by banks. In other words, they're better able to understand the links between theory and practice. So they bring meaning to these really, really difficult subjects and topics which are hard to understand. The area that I've particularly specialised in Northern Ireland is bringing in the voices of people who have lived experience of the Troubles, over 30 years of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And we've published quite widely on that, and we've presented it in different countries. And we're really pleased with the fact that through the direct involvement of people who have lived experience of trauma, have been directly impacted, bereaved, injured, and traumatized through the Troubles, students, social work students, have been able to understand the knowledge, skills, and values that will better inform how they respond to people that are still living with the difficulties of those experiences. I brought that model to New York in 2019 when I worked directly with people affected by 9/11 in 2001, and I was able to work directly with survivors from 9/11, which I'll refer to a wee bit later in the presentation. One of the other aspects of research we did was we tried to evaluate and analyse the extent to which the messages that students get from service users during their training, what impact do those messages have on students when they qualify. And it's really pleasing to know in the piece of research we did in 2017, where we followed groups of students in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, and also in Birmingham. When we followed those students out into practice, we indeed found that those messages that the students were getting from the likes of Orla, from Margaret, from Brendan, from Claire and others, they actually do stay with the students when they qualify. So that's really, really important. And it was really important for the service users that we worked with in Queens, for them to know that these messages that they were sharing with the students based on their lived experience were actually staying with them when they qualify. Empathy as well, the ability to really understand how another person, how another human being is feeling, and associated with that, developing relational understanding, we also find is different. And there's more of a depth of understanding to those particular areas of students' social work competence when service users are involved in assessment of students' preparedness for going into practice in terms of preparation for practice skills. Drama students as well can help the students, but their involvement and their input can be really impactful at an earlier stage when the students are still adjusting and adapting to university life. But the service user involvement coming in later had a different impact in terms of empathy and the students' relational understanding. So that's the second signpost in terms of opportunity. It's also important to be critical thinkers and to be critical as well, to deepen our understanding of the rationale for service user involvement in any type of education. And turning again to Peter Beresford's work, user knowledge, service user knowledge grows from personal experience of policy, practice and services. And you heard Margaret and Claire very definitely saying that, you heard Brendan saying it, and you heard Orla saying that. However, as well, there's also literature that challenges this and says that, however, service user involvement maybe is overly subjective and it's not infallible. And I mean, I have had experience as well with a service user, coming from a service user background, who I've worked with for many years, who openly said to my students, forget about anything that you've read in a book. What you really need to be connected into is what service users have lived through. But I openly said to the service user in that instance, look, what the students are learning in the books are equally important. There is no sort of hierarchy of knowledge. All knowledge is important. All knowledge is equal. And therefore, I've concluded this point in saying that all knowledge claims should be exposed to critical questioning in line with promoting real and genuine anti-oppressive practice. And the other point I was struck whenever Brendan was saying there as well, that Brendan came from a place of having negative and not good experiences, but was able to turn those experiences around by framing them in more of a positive way in regard to helping social work students understand the context of what Brendan went through, in the hope that that wouldn't happen for future service users going forward. By social workers hearing those messages, they'll be able to reflect back on the need to avoid a person having a negative experience. And that sort of chimes into the point that Malcolm Carey is making there in regard to, should service users even be considering participating with a political and economic system responsible for causing so many of their problems? So that's our third signpost in terms of criticality. How am I doing for time there, Susan?
Yeah, you're fine. You have actually about 15 minutes left.
That's what I was hoping, yeah, I'm about halfway through. So it's also important to avoid tokenism, what Campbell in 1996 refers to as tokenism, because and tokenism can occur if service user involvement is not properly or adequately prepared for. If people are left feeling that they haven't been adequately prepared for the involvement experience, that there hasn't been open and honest dialogue about what to expect, if there hasn't been an opportunity to actually come along and think about the type of involvement, the type of presentation, the type of experience that they anticipate, or what's expected of them by the university or whoever the provider is. So you can avoid tokenism by good preparation, by open and honest dialogue in terms of looking at the rationale for involvement, by providing proper support, by looking at remuneration, and also by evaluating the impact. Service users definitely want to know whether their involvement has made a difference. And I can't remember everybody's names there from Brendan, Orla and Michael's presentation, but you can very clearly see that they wanted to know, and that they were really, they valued the fact that they were having an impact on the students' competence, knowledge and development. The literature also refers to the notion of an ethic of care being needed to approach this in an open, honest, supportive and caring way. And I reflect back on the work I did with survivors from 9/11. And I mean, I was meeting people for the very first time. I had about 3 to 4 weeks to get to know people before they come into the classroom. And I was really, really careful about the fact that I was very mindful of the need to avoid ever re-traumatizing anybody in regard to such the magnitude and enormity of that particular experience. And that ethic of care needed to be reflected in the face-to-face conversations we had, but also even in the email communications we had with each other, and the way in which it was managed in the classroom as well, so as it would be a positive experience and not one that a person would walk away from the classroom thinking, I'm never going back there again. And I think that basically connects into the importance of kindness, the importance of openness, the importance of relationship, and the importance of good communication skills as well, and being able to explain possibly what are complicated things in an open and honest and accessible way. It's also important that you explore a range of opportunities and possibilities. There are so many ways of actually approaching service user involvement. And over the years, I've had people who felt very comfortable and confident coming in to talk in front of a large group of students on their own. I've had other people who felt more comfortable and confident talking in a small group or doing one-to-one teaching. I've also had people who've come from a service user background who wanted to come in and read poetry. I've also had somebody who was a songwriter who wanted to come in and perform a song that he'd written about the way in which he'd been impacted by the Troubles. So, you know, think creatively, think innovatively, And pedagogically, that can be really, really good for the students and for everybody else involved. The paper that we've come out in the British Journal of Social Work as well, we highlight that people need to be involved from the start. Any research that I've been involved in, that I've done, and that others have done, makes it really, really clear that when you're at the ideas stage, when you're at the thinking point, that's when you need to have service users around the table with you to help you unpack your thinking. Because when service users are involved from the start, they'll feel that there's not going to be a tokenistic approach to this, and they'll feel very wedded to actually making the whole involvement experience and the whole involvement journey a positive one. And really, there should be opportunities at all levels, not just operationally as well, but in terms of the management aspects of courses. Wenger talks about the importance, and this is point number 4, the development, develop communities of practice. Look at the community of practice that Michael, Orla and Brendan and others are now part of. And it really does bring the curriculum to life. It democratizes the classroom. Think about different ways of doing things. Very clearly, Michael and colleagues there talked about the fact that that really interesting disability module was co-produced. Work with others locally and around the world. There's lots of people who are doing really interesting work in this, so you're not on your own, and you can explore really, really good opportunities for internationalizing the understanding and internationalizing your collegiality as well. I've done that with colleagues in America and across Europe, and I've really learned from that. I've benefited from it, and hopefully my students have as well. It's also very important that you work with your colleagues. You empower the learning and development of your colleagues. A lot of the publications that I've been involved in writing have not been me on my own. They've actually been me working along with other colleagues and service users as collaborators. And it's also important that we help each other out. I mean, I think it's very important to offer training, support and guidance to service user organizations, and also get members of service user organizations, those communities of practice, to help others as well, to support people that are maybe new to come into service user involvement. So you're creating that sort of culture of support and helping each other in the endeavor. How am I doing now, Susan? About 5 minutes, have I?
Yeah, in and around, yeah, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that's fine.
Okay, it was great to hear Michael talking as well about the fact that there's a publication based on the findings from the module, and again that connects into this additional theme of research, social work education and other interprofessional journals will welcome publications in this area. It's really important to evaluate the impact of service user involvement whenever you're doing this. A model that I've found very helpful is Carpenter's work in 2011. And John Carpenter talks about the importance of evaluating outcomes, learning outcomes, looking at the learning and the education experience. This can also lead to the dissemination of findings at national and international conferences. And I've traveled with service user colleagues at international and European conferences, and it's been really, really good to do that. And there are also funding opportunities available. I mean, there's small grant funding available through, for example, the International Association of Schools of Social Work, and they've supported me in the past with some work that I've done. This notion of reciprocity as well, I think is very important, and that's that sense of giving back. That, and you heard it was great to hear people talking about the experience of coming into work in Trinity, being involved in a lecturing role. That is really, really important in terms of personal recognition, a sense of value, a sense of your own self-esteem, in terms of the opportunity to be involved in a university and in a university setting. Opportunities for service user educators to further develop their skills and acquire new skills. Several people that I started off working with as service users and carers are now social workers. They went on to do the social work course themselves. A couple of people as well went on to do research. One just qualified with his doctorate a couple of months ago. Another person got a commendation in their master's. So it's all about education and research capacity building. helping each other, and benefiting from the wonderful opportunities that the university has. It's not just about paying people, but you can also pay people in different ways that will actually encourage, grow, flourish, develop their sense of personal and social capital. And that'll make people feel very positive about coming back and still being involved in service user involvement in the future. And the final slide here, I've just said it's worth it. And this is a picture, start of September in New York, at the launch of our research findings from evaluating the impact of the involvement of survivors from 9/11 in classroom teaching. And when we did our evaluation of that particular research, these people were in several, there are a couple of people who are not in this photograph, but this photograph was at our launch event in the British Embassy in New York. And you can probably get a sense of the skyline there in the background. But one of the most lovely things that we heard was from one of the students who said, for me, this is probably one of the most powerful learning experiences that I have had at NYU. And I think that was really important for all of the survivors who were involved in that teaching to hear that this was the very, very first time they'd ever done that they'd ever been in the classroom. And for many, it was their first time talking about the enormity and the magnitude of what happened on that particular day, an event that was witnessed by a third of the world's population. So it definitely is worth it. It's hard work, but if you follow, I mean, I've certainly, for me, what's been helpful are to follow those sort of principles that I've highlighted in order to get to a point where I can reflect and look back and think that this journey has been a learning journey, it's been a powerful journey, but it's also been a very worthwhile journey. I've included a whole list of references there as well for you to see. I'm more than happy to share this presentation. And if anybody would like any follow-up or to come back to me further with any questions or indeed any further clarification on anything, I've put my contact details in there. But I've really enjoyed speaking to you. I hope you found it helpful, and I'm happy to take any questions that along with our other presenters that anybody might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was extremely helpful, informative presentation. I found it really interesting, a lot of the examples you gave, and you know, I think for me there's a lot more dimensions to this than, you know, I would have anticipated, I suppose, from the both presentations. I can see it is a more complex area. There's a lot of dimensions, a lot of considerations, and they span, you know, from ethical to practical considerations. So yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you so much. So I've noticed there's a few questions there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look in the Q&A, and I'm going to direct some of the questions to the speakers. And just for attendees, if you have any questions, you just pop them in the Q&A. So I suppose just the first question. Vivian says it's a great presentation. Thank you, in relation to Michael, Orla and Brendan's presentation. And she says, apologies if she missed this, but how many lecturers were recruited in the project?
Okay, I suppose I should take that one just because I was involved in the first time around. It was, we initially, for the first year, we took on 6 part-time staff. They were recruited through basically we put the call out to graduates of the course for people with disabilities in Trinity, and we also put the call out to a self-advocacy group that I had been involved in the past. So we ended up, I'd say we interviewed about 12, 15 people for the 6 places, and got 6 people since then. Now, we've been lucky in that since then some people have moved on. In fact, quite a lot of people have got full-time jobs and things like that, so we've been able to bring in more people then. So but initially it was 6 people, and it was through interviews, very much like you do interviews for any other kind of role. There was a kind of a formal interview setting.
That's great, thank you so much. And so just in terms of another question, just a comment that there was a brilliant presentations again from Orla, Brendan and Michael. And the question is just, I'm wondering if specifically this is aimed at you, Michael, if you have any experience about how people with disabilities who are non-verbal could contribute in a similar way to higher education.
Yeah, I don't have experience. I've thought about it quite a lot. It is a real problem in kind of self-advocacy, and especially around people with intellectual disabilities and so on. I'm also interested in kind of in queer theory and things like that. So I'm conscious of debates and ideas around inclusion by assimilation, and then should we be doing that, or should we be acknowledging difference? It's a real issue, because what you do by, we have tended to have the kind of most articulate people, the most able people and so on, which is brilliant. And the guys are absolutely fantastic at presenting, and they're valued for their teaching skills and presenting skills. But when you do that, you leave out a whole other cohort of people with intellectual disabilities. What you do as well, when you bring, you have lecturers that are very articulate and the most able, there's a sense there of people with intellectual disabilities are just like you and me. And of course that's true on some levels, but on other levels, a lot of people with intellectual disabilities are very different in ways, and those people are kind of most of the time silenced. You don't bring those people in, and they're not kind of included. That's a real issue. Now, how you get around that, I'm not sure. I know that there is, just from doing the literature review, I know that there is one study on the social work module they included a guy that was non-verbal. I'd have to read that again to kind of tell you more details about it. So it has been done, but it's very rare, and I acknowledge and I can see the problem with that. I know Orla and Brendan had some we were discussing things they were interested in yesterday, and they had some ideas about like who they could speak for and who else, people with other kinds of disabilities, that they thought should be kind of included. So Orla and Brendan, have you got any thoughts on should people with other types of disabilities, or people with disabilities maybe that can't speak so well, how they should be included?
Okay. People with other disabilities, maybe have a support worker who's willing to help them speak, let them work with them, and let them decide what they want to say, and they just support them as they're stuck. Because again, people with other disabilities, all sorts of disabilities, will organise disability, well, expert needs, should I say. Organise the expert needs is we're like a hidden disability, so like we would need less support.
Yeah.
But other people would probably need a staff that's willing to let the stand in with the people that want to speak, that are not that are different that are not how do I describe this, that's just different than the way we are. Yeah. Not saying that every person with disability is different, they all have their own talents, their own skills and stuff, but my opinion, I could other people that can't speak, and other people maybe brings a machine for people that can't speak, but that would like to speak for themselves. That's my opinion. I'll go to.
I would be the same. If I know, as you know, Michael, there's 1 or 2 people in the Prosper and Portmarnock that can't talk, but they have a speaker, so they should be included. Mm-hmm. Like, because as I say, they're no different from what we are to what you are. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One more thought I've had on that is a project that I work with Orla and Brendan on, but also other self-advocates with intellectual disabilities, was the 19 Stories of Social Inclusion Ireland. And that was done by video, and we made videos about different people and their stories of being included in their communities. That was much easier to include people that were nonverbal, because what you did was you could tell their story cinematically. So you followed them in their everyday places, the places they went to, and you also interviewed them along with their family members, their supporters, and so on, that could speak not for them, but could speak about their likes, their wants, and stuff like that. So that worked quite well in the kind of video format there. But I think it would be really interesting, and it's really needed, the kind of how you would incorporate people with nonverbal in a live kind of lecture setting without it becoming like an old-fashioned kind of medical, you know, when they bring in a case study kind of thing. So yeah, excellent question anyway, Michelle.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that helpful answer. And I do have to apologize, there's quite a lot of questions, we just won't get a chance to get to all of them today, so but I'll do my best to kind of work through them. So it kind of then just moving on to yourself, Joe. So one of the questions, so there was a comment there that fantastic presentations from everybody, and then the question for yourself, Joe, is what roles can education regulators play in terms of kind of promoting and trying to create consistency in service user involvement in education courses, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. In Northern Ireland, this was service user involvement was introduced in 2003 by the Northern Ireland Social Care Council, who is the regulator for social work here in Northern Ireland. So what they do actually, as part of the 5-yearly degree or review of our degree in social work, they will monitor service user involvement and the extent to which it's been adequately and properly mainstreamed right across the curriculum. So it is part of the regulator's role in that regard. But as well as it being a regulatory requirement, I think it's also important that, you know, when you think back to Beresford's point at the very beginning about, is this a managerialist function or is it more coming from the democratic standpoint and viewpoint? And certainly the regulator that I work with here in Northern Ireland would be the latter. It very much has always been behind the spirit of involvement and encouraged it right across Northern Ireland. And what they do as well is that, I mean, they're very positive and receptive to hosting workshops where service users can present, and service users and academic colleagues can present together like we have done today. So there are two aspects to it. So it's first of all, it's been wedded to the ethos and spirit of service user involvement and evidencing that, but also ensuring that people are actually doing this and doing it in a consistent way. And that's something that we're even though we feel we're working really, really hard at it, we can still learn and we can still improve and we can still do it better. And I think it is very important as well not to be under the illusion that there are armies of service users and carers who want to be involved. There actually are small numbers here. So we have to be very, very careful and very supportive of service user involvement, especially at the very outset. It takes a long time to develop good, meaningful, trusting relationships, but equally relationships, you have to manage them and you have to support people. We all need to be supported in this journey together in order to maintain those relationships. So I hope that's been able to give you a sense of that in terms of the answer.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Joe. And just one more question for yourself. So this question is, what safe practice frameworks would you recommend or consider to be useful just to kind of help avoid burnout and re-traumatization of service users, which is something I know you kind of mentioned in your talk?
Yeah, well, back in 2012, we actually wrote and designed our own course for this in Queens. And that was one of the areas that we looked at in terms of the safe telling of material that maybe, as a previous service user who's passed on, sadly now said to me, Joe, you're asking me to talk about stuff that I want to forget. I'll never forget what him saying that to me, because people are talking about aspects of their lives that were difficult. So I think what I have always done is the starting point has always been with the service user themselves in terms of what do you feel safe and comfortable talking about. And I mean, when I was thinking about even trying to get service users to talk about the experiences of 9/11, where do you start? And when I was sitting in the room with all of those people, they were saying, right, can we agree the question? And the question that they agreed for the classroom was, can you share with these students a summary of your experiences from 9/11? So they felt very comfortable that they were only going to talk about some aspects of 9/11 that they themselves felt comfortable about. And it was exactly the same with the Troubles victims and survivors. They only wanted to talk about what particular aspects of that lived experience that they felt safe and comfortable talking about. And what we always do then, and what I've always done, is I've stayed in the classroom with people. I've monitored their behavior very closely to make sure that people were safe. Now, there's been a couple of times when people did feel unexpectedly emotional, where it did impact on them. Stuff just crept up that they hadn't expected. Feelings appeared that they weren't expecting. And what you always do then is that you debrief and you de-roll at the end. We always have the cup of tea or the cup of coffee and the biscuits at the very end. We always started off doing that as well before the presentations. And then there's a follow-up that evening and a follow-up the next day. But equally, you also have to think about the impact on the students who are witnessing potentially traumatic messages and traumatic content. So the training course was very important in terms of people feeling safe and feeling comfortable about aspects of difficulty in their lives previously that they wanted to talk about. And that ethic of care approach really was the framework that I would tend to use, and that I find has been helpful and useful.
Thank you so much. And I just say it's unfortunate I don't have time to read out all the comments, because there's some really good comments and people have got great questions as well. Lydia says, many thanks to all presenters for the excellent presentations. Very important points made now about whose voice and narrative is being heard. We tend to rely on articulate, authentic representations, and many voices and stories can be lost and excluded. So that's absolutely the case. What I might do, I'll just direct one other question just over at Orla and Brendan. So this question was, would you be able to say anything about whether students had any kind of assumptions or any kind of, what did students think about disability, I suppose? If you could just maybe comment on that.
Some students that they were doing the talks they didn't have much confidence, because we started off with a group. It was just like an advocacy group. There was loads of, you're with the CPN, which is connecting people, which has a group. We all changed it, and we gave more people, and more people got more and more confident. So I think the talks made them more confident. I think when other people talk about their feelings, how they have expert needs, you gradually get the confidence to speak to how your personal experience. My personal experience with expert needs is that I didn't really know, because I went to mainstream school, and I was going on school like normal, and I didn't know I had disability until like at least 19 years of age. So yeah, they got more and more and they feel more important now that they have a voice, that they could speak to other people that want to listen, because at the end we are people like everybody else. We just need that little extra support. A lot of people were really happy about that they actually got a chance to speak to the social workers, the training social workers, the training key workers, because it's like we usually talk to them. Like we're now feeling how it feels like to be a social worker. If we were a social worker, how would the people feel about it? So I feel get them more confident. Like everybody in the the group got more and more confident about it. I
Brilliant.
just seen all the people and all the stuff, and a lot of people with expert needs now are going to college. So yeah, that's my opinion. Yeah.
That's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. So look, we're coming up on just finishing up time. So what I'm going to do is just summarize and kind of wrap up. So I'd say again, you know, like Joe had mentioned there, I think, Joe, one or two people kind of expressed that they might want to get in touch with you. They have kind of similar research interests and backgrounds and stuff like that. So that's great. And people might be in touch afterwards because we haven't kind of been able to get around to everything. And I suppose, yeah, just to finish up, I'd echo what a lot of the comments are saying. Really highly informative session, very useful session. And just thank you so much to, you know, all the kind of speakers for contributing here today. And on behalf of, you know, the School of Social Work and Social Policy at Trinity College Dublin, just thank you all for attending. And I personally thank you as chair of this event. So yeah, I think that's everything. So yeah, excellent presentations, and yeah, hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. So you can kind of click the leave button then to kind of finish up.